Lonely Woodsman takes in a widow and her 3 children. Unaware they will become his family, forever the sun was low over the red canyons of Iridian 9, casting long shadows over the dusty ground. Caleb Thorne moved slowly through the rocks, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. The frontier planet was harsh and unforgiving. Sandstorms could appear without warning, and strange creatures sometimes prowled the desert at night. Caleb had lived alone here for many years. He liked it that way. Solitude was safe. People brought trouble. Caleb's cabin sat on the edge of a small canyon. It was simple, built from rough timber and reinforced with metal scraps. The walls were lined with shelves holding tools, jars of preserved food, and mechanical parts. Outside, a few robotic horses stood quietly, powered down in the heat of the day. Caleb had built them himself. They were loyal companions, faster and stronger than real horses, and they never complained. That afternoon, while fixing a broken water collector near the cabin, Caleb saw something strange in the distance. A small ship was falling through the sky, smoke trailing behind it. It crashed into the rocky canyon below with a loud bang, throwing up clouds of dust. Caleb's heart quickened. Few travelers dared come this far. Most were afraid of the desert or the old warnings of the mining corporations that ruled parts of Iridian 9. But someone had landed or crashed very close to his home. He grabbed his rifle, loaded it carefully, and started down the rocky slope. The air smelled of burning metal and ozone from the crash. As he got closer, he saw movement. A woman and 3 children were struggling to get out of the wrecked ship. The woman was trying to help the children, but they were small, frightened, and unsure what to do. Caleb stayed hidden at first, watching them. The woman looked tired. Her clothes were torn and her skin was dust-streaked. One child was crying softly while the others clung to her. Caleb's instincts, honed from years of survival, told him to approach carefully. People could be dangerous, and the frontier had many secrets. But something about her eyes, tired, scared, but strong, made him step forward. "Hey," he called, keeping his voice calm. "Are you hurt?" The woman turned, startled. She raised her hands. "Please," she said, "don't shoot. We need help. Our ship crashed. My children." Caleb nodded slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you. Come with me. I have water and shelter." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. The children stayed close to her, peering at the stranger. Caleb guided them carefully back to his cabin. The sun was now almost gone, and the canyons glowed a deep red. Caleb opened the cabin door, letting them step inside. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and metal oil. Caleb gestured to a corner where they could sit. "Sit down," he said simply. "You can rest here tonight." The woman, who introduced herself as Mara, gathered her children close. The eldest, a girl named Leela, looked wary but curious. The middle child, Finn, kept looking around the cabin, fascinated by the strange gadgets and the robotic horses outside. The youngest Sira hid behind Mara, clutching a small blanket. Caleb went to a shelf and poured water into cups. He handed one to Mara and one to the children. "Drink," he said. His voice was steady, simple, nothing unnecessary. Mara took a careful sip. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't found you." Caleb shrugged. "You're welcome, but we need to check the ship. Maybe there's something dangerous left behind." Together they stepped outside. The crash site was worse than Caleb expected. The ship's hull was torn and smoking. Sparks flew from exposed circuits and small fires burned in patches. Caleb examined the wreck carefully, making sure there were no leaking gases. Mara watched, anxious, but trusting him enough not to interfere. "I can fix some of this," Mara said finally. Caleb looked at her, surprised. "I was a mechanic before everything happened. I can help you repair things if you want." Caleb studied her. She was strong in a quiet way, determined, useful, not someone to underestimate. He nodded slowly. "All right, we'll see what you can do tomorrow. For now, you need rest. It's dangerous to work in the dark out here." They returned to the cabin. Caleb lit a small fire in the hearth. The children watched, their eyes wide. Caleb handed them simple rations, preserved fruits, and dried meat. The smell was different, strange to their senses, but they ate. Slowly, their fear eased. Mara sat across from Caleb, watching him carefully. "You live alone out here?" she asked. "Yes," Caleb said simply. "I like it that way. It's safe." She nodded, but she did not seem judgmental. She understood. "You must be very skilled," she said, "to live alone in a place like this." Caleb shrugged again. "I've survived. That's all that matters." The night grew darker. Outside, the twin moons of Iridian 9 rose, casting a silver glow across the canyon. Caleb could hear the wind whistling through the rocks, carrying the faint cries of distant creatures. He walked to the window and looked out. Myra's children were sleeping now, huddled together. Myra herself seemed to relax, leaning back against the cabin wall. Caleb felt a strange stir in his chest. He had lived for years without company. He thought he liked it. But now, seeing them here small, fragile, trusting, he felt something unfamiliar. A pull, responsibility. A desire to protect. He turned back to the fire. The cabin felt smaller now, but warmer. The walls that once echoed only with his own movements now held voices, soft and human. The children stirred slightly, murmuring in their sleep. Caleb watched them, careful not to make a sound. He thought of the dangers outside. The frontier was not kind. Patrols from the mining corporation could come searching. Sandstorms could trap them. Strange predators could find their way near. Yet despite the risks, Caleb did not want them to leave, not now, not ever. He returned to his bed, but sleep did not come quickly. His mind wandered to the future. How would he protect them? Could he keep them safe on this wild planet? Could he teach them to survive without losing their innocence? Morning came slowly, with soft light spilling into the canyon. The air was cooler, and the wind carried the scent of dust and metal. Caleb woke first, watching the children play quietly with small mechanical toys he had left on a shelf. Leela and Finn were laughing softly. Sierra clung to Mara but peeked curiously at Caleb. He made breakfast, simple, hot porridge, and watched them eat. Mara helped, stirring the food carefully, setting plates for the children. There was a quiet rhythm to their movements, small gestures of normalcy in a harsh world. Caleb felt the warmth of it. After breakfast, he led Mara and the children outside. The desert was wide and harsh, but Caleb showed them the small patches of safety he had discovered over the years. A hidden spring, a sheltered cave, and the paths the robotic horses could navigate safely. The children were curious, asking questions, learning quickly. Caleb answered in simple words, careful and patient. By midday, Caleb realized something. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten how to feel human, but now, with Mara and her children, something was changing. His world, once only rocks and dust, had space for laughter, for care, for family. He did not say it aloud. He could not. But deep down, Caleb knew this was the start of something new, something he could not have imagined in his years of solitude. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in orange and red, Caleb stood outside his cabin again. He watched Mara and the children, their silhouettes soft against the rocky cliffs. He felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Life on the frontier was dangerous, yes. But perhaps for the first time it could also be beautiful. And Caleb Thorne, the lonely woodsman of Iridian 9, understood that his life was about to change forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the rocky cliffs in soft orange and pink. Caleb Thorne had already been awake for a while. He moved quietly around the cabin, checking the robotic horses and repairing a small water filter. The wind carried the scent of dry sand and distant metal. It was calm now, but the frontier was always unpredictable. Caleb knew they could not relax for long. Mara and the children were still asleep. He peeked into their corner of the cabin. Leela, the eldest, had wrapped herself in a blanket, holding Finn's hand gently. Sierra, the youngest, was tucked near Mara, her small face peaceful. Caleb felt a strange warmth in his chest. For years, he had lived alone. Now the sight of them brought him a sense of care he could not name. After breakfast, Caleb called the children outside. "Today you will learn how to move safely across the canyon," he said simply. His voice was firm but kind. The children's eyes lit up with curiosity. Mara followed quietly, watching Caleb with a mix of trust and caution. Caleb led them to a narrow path that wound along the cliffs. The path was safe, but only if you knew the rocks and hidden ledges. He showed Leela how to spot loose stones, how to test a step before putting full weight on it. Finn learned how to use small markers made from sticks and stones to remember paths through the desert. Sierra clung to Mara, but Caleb knelt and guided her tiny hand to touch safe stones and climb slowly. "You see," Caleb said, "this desert is full of danger, but if you know it, you can walk safely." The children nodded seriously, their small faces eager to learn. For the first time, they felt part of something bigger than fear and running. Mara's eyes softened as she watched. Caleb was teaching them not just survival, but confidence. As the day wore on, Caleb introduced them to the robotic horses. The children's eyes widened. They had never seen anything like them before. Caleb explained how the horses worked, showing them the control panels and safety switches. Leela and Finn were quick to understand, and even Sierra laughed as the horses' metal hooves clanked on the rocks. Myra helped Caleb adjust the horses, tightening screws and checking circuits. He noticed how skilled she was with the tools. "You were right," he said quietly. "You can help more than I thought." Myra smiled, a small but genuine curve of her lips. They returned to the cabin for a midday meal. Caleb cooked simple food, preserved vegetables, dried meat, and water, while Myra helped set the table. The children sat quietly, still full of energy from their morning lessons. Caleb noticed how Leela kept glancing at the sky, as if she could imagine flying across the desert like a bird. Finn examined the robotic horses, asking questions about how they were built. Sierra, content with her small portion, nibbled slowly, happy to be near her mother. The afternoon passed peacefully until distant lights appeared on the horizon. Caleb squinted. Hovercrafts, the mining corporation patrols. They had likely tracked Mara's ship. His instincts kicked in immediately. "Children, stay close," Caleb said, his voice low but urgent. "Myra, we need to hide." He led them to a small cave he had discovered months ago, one hidden behind a wall of jagged rocks. It was safe, dry, and almost invisible from a distance. Caleb moved quickly, helping Myra and the children inside. They crouched in silence, listening as the hovercrafts approached, their engines humming and whistling across the canyon. The patrols scanned the desert with bright lights. Caleb's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. He whispered instructions to Mara and the children. "Stay quiet, don't move, breathe slowly. We will wait until they pass." The hovercrafts hovered closer, and Caleb could hear the voices of the patrols, speaking in harsh, metallic tones. They were searching for survivors, for intruders, for anyone daring to live on this forbidden part of the planet. Caleb held his breath, shielding the children with his body. After what felt like hours, the patrols moved on. Caleb waited a few minutes more, ensuring the danger had passed. Then he led the family back to the cabin, checking each corner, every entrance. "They may come again," he said, "but we will be ready." Mara's hand brushed his as they entered. She looked at him with a quiet gratitude. "You saved us," she said softly. "I don't know how we would survive without you." Caleb nodded, keeping his thoughts private. He had saved many travelers before, but something about this family was different. Protecting them felt more than duty. It felt necessary. That evening, Caleb taught the children how to set small alarms and traps using simple wires, rocks, and mechanical sensors. They learned quickly, giggling quietly when Finn accidentally triggered a small clanging device. Leela concentrated, careful to follow Caleb's instructions exactly. Sierra watched, her small hands trying to imitate the movements. As the stars appeared in the sky, the family sat outside near the fire. The twin moons of Iridian 9 glowed softly, casting silver light on the rocky canyon. Caleb watched the children play, their laughter like music he had long forgotten. Mara sat beside him, sharing a small blanket to ward off the chill of the desert night. "You've changed our lives," Mara said quietly. "We were lost, and now we have hope." Caleb said nothing, but his heart stirred. He had lived for years thinking he wanted nothing but solitude. Now he understood that life without others, life without family, was emptier than the desert itself. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far canyon. Caleb jumped to his feet, rifle in hand. Mara grabbed the children, pulling them behind her. Caleb peered toward the source. A sandstorm had begun, picking up rocks and dust, sweeping across the canyon. The wind howled, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. "We need to secure the cabin," Caleb shouted over the storm. Together, they moved quickly. Mara helped tie down supplies, while the children held ropes and small poles. Caleb reinforced the cabin door and windows, ensuring nothing could break inside. The storm raged for hours, testing their endurance and courage. When the storm finally subsided, the sky was clear again. The desert was calm, the twin moons shining softly. Caleb looked at the family. They were exhausted, covered in dust, but unharmed. They had survived together. For the first time, Caleb allowed himself a small smile. This family, Mara and her children, were no longer strangers. They had proven their strength, their trust, and their resilience. And Caleb realized, in the quiet of the desert night, that he had begun to care for them more than he had ever expected. As they settled inside the cabin, Caleb reflected on the day. He had taught them survival, shielded them from danger, and faced the storms with them. But more than that, he had started to build something new, a bond, a family, a life worth living. Myra and the children fell asleep quickly, lulled by exhaustion and the soft hum of the robotic horses outside. Caleb stayed awake a while longer, sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. He thought about the future. Patrols could return, storms could strike again, and the desert would always demand vigilance. But he also thought about laughter, hope, and small hands learning to trust him. For the first time in years, Caleb Thorne did not feel alone. And as the twin moons of Iridian 9 bathed the canyon in gentle light, Caleb knew that no matter the dangers ahead, he would protect them. They were his responsibility now, and in protecting them, he had begun to find something he had long lost: connection, warmth, and perhaps, in time, love. The morning air on Iridian 9 was crisp, but tension hung heavily over Caleb Thorne's cabin. He stood outside, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. The distant hills were quiet now, but he knew the patrols from the mining corporation would not give up easily. Mara and the children were inside, quietly preparing breakfast, unaware of the danger that might return. Caleb moved like a shadow, checking the mechanical horses, the perimeter sensors, and the traps he had set after the last patrol. Every rock, every ledge, every cave in the canyon had been studied by him for years. He knew how to hide, how to survive, and how to fight if necessary. But protecting Mara and her children was more than just survival. This was personal. He returned to the cabin just as Mara was placing the porridge on the small table. Leela looked up from her seat. "Are they coming back?" she asked softly. Caleb shook his head, but his eyes did not leave the canyon. "Maybe," he said. "If they do, we'll be ready, but today we practice." He led the children outside to a small plateau near the cabin. Here he taught them how to hide behind rocks, how to move silently, and how to watch the terrain for threats. Leela was careful and clever, quickly learning to spot even the smallest movement. Finn was fascinated by Caleb's use of the sensors and drones. He eagerly followed instructions, adjusting small cameras Caleb had installed. Sira, still small and timid, clung to Mara's hand but giggled when Caleb demonstrated a playful way to duck behind rocks. After hours of practice, the family returned to the cabin. Caleb watched Mara quietly as she worked on repairing some small tools. She was skilled, patient, and calm even under pressure. "You've taught them well," she said softly, glancing at him. "They are brave because of you?" Caleb shrugged. "They are learning, that's all." But neither of them noticed the faint hum in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Hovercrafts, they were back. He grabbed his rifle and motioned to Mara and the children. "Inside, now." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Mara quickly gathered the children, leading them to the cave behind the cabin. Caleb checked the perimeter one last time, then moved into position near the entrance. The hovercrafts approached, low to the ground, their lights scanning the desert. A team of 4 soldiers disembarked, their armor glinting under the twin suns. Caleb held his breath, waiting for the right moment. The patrols split, searching for signs of life, moving cautiously over the rocky terrain. Caleb studied their patterns, noting their blind spots. Then he acted. Using a combination of small alarms and the robotic horses as decoys, Caleb created distractions. One horse clattered across a ledge, drawing the attention of 2 soldiers. Another sensor emitted a loud beep, causing another patrol to investigate. Caleb stayed hidden, guiding Mara and the children through a narrow path to the rear of the canyon. The children's hearts pounded with fear and excitement. Leela held Finn's hand tightly. "We can do this," she whispered. Sira clung to Mara, her small voice trembling. Caleb led them with careful steps, teaching them how to move silently, how to hide in the shadows, and how to use the terrain to their advantage. The patrols were skilled, but Caleb's knowledge of the canyon and his preparation gave them the upper hand. At one point, Finn accidentally triggered a small clanging sensor. Caleb froze, then signaled the children to stay still. The patrol turned, scanning the area. Caleb whispered, "Wait for my signal." When the soldier passed by, Caleb guided the family further into the canyon, deeper into safety. Finally, they reached a hidden cave system that Caleb had discovered years before. It was dark, cool, and safe from sight. The children gasped at the narrow tunnels, but Caleb reassured them. "This is our hiding place. We will stay here until it is safe." Inside the cave, Mara helped calm the children. "We are safe now," she said. "Caleb knows what to do. We trust him." The family huddled together, listening to the sounds of the patrols outside. Hovercrafts roared as they moved over the rocks, searching, but they could not see the hidden entrance. Caleb peeked through a narrow slit in the cave wall, watching carefully. He knew the patrols would not leave easily. They were determined, trained, and dangerous. But Caleb had something they did not: knowledge, patience, and unity. Hours passed. The patrols eventually retreated, unable to find the family. Caleb waited until the desert grew quiet, then guided them back to the cabin. The sun was setting, painting the canyon in gold and red. The family was exhausted but safe. Caleb checked the cabin carefully, repairing minor damage from their hasty departure. Myra helped, placing tools back on shelves and preparing a simple meal. Leela and Finn carried small rocks and debris outside, helping quietly. Sierra played near the hearth, her small laughter bringing warmth to the cabin. After the meal, Caleb taught the children more about survival. He showed them how to use small mechanical traps to detect intruders and how to move silently through the desert at night. Leela quickly mastered the techniques, her sharp eyes noticing every detail. Finn was fascinated by Caleb's drones, learning how to operate them with precision. Even Sierra showed courage, carefully mimicking Caleb's movements with a small practice rope. Myra watched them with quiet pride. She knew they were learning more than just survival. Caleb was teaching them courage, confidence, and the power of unity. That night the family sat outside near the fire. The twin moons of Iridian 9 reflected in the canyon's pools of water, creating a soft, silver glow. Caleb looked at the children, their faces lit by the fire. They were tired, dusty, and a little frightened, but they were learning to trust him. Mara sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "You've done more than protect us today," she said quietly. "You've given them hope." Caleb did not answer immediately. He stared into the fire, thinking about the day, the dangers, and the bond that had grown between them. He had lived for years in solitude, relying only on himself. But now he understood something new. Protecting this family was not just about survival. It was about care, connection, and love. Suddenly, a soft sound echoed from the canyon entrance. The patrols were gone, but Caleb could not ignore the possibility of return. He stood, rifle in hand, ready to defend them if necessary. Mara's eyes followed him, trusting and steady. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We are ready. We can face anything together." The children looked up, their small faces filled with admiration and trust. Leela whispered, "We can do it with you, Caleb." Finn and Sierra nodded quietly. Caleb's heart warmed. They were not just children anymore. They were a team, a family, a unit that could face the frontier together. As the night deepened, Caleb reflected on the day's events. The patrols were dangerous, storms were unpredictable, and the desert would always demand vigilance. But for the first time, he felt a sense of belonging. Myra and her children were no longer strangers. They were part of his life, his responsibility, and slowly his heart. The twin moons shone brightly over Iridian 9, bathing the canyon in gentle light. The fire crackled softly, casting long shadows on the rocks. The family huddled together, tired but safe, knowing that together they could face any challenge. Caleb knew that the frontier was harsh and wild, but with Myra and the children, it was no longer lonely. Tomorrow, they would continue to learn, to survive, and to grow stronger. Caleb had taught them today that courage and trust could overcome fear. And as he looked at them sleeping peacefully, he realized that protecting this family was no longer just a choice. It was his purpose. For Caleb Thorne, the lonely woodsman, the frontier was no longer a place of isolation. It was a place of life, of connection, and of family. And no matter the dangers that lay ahead, he would face them all with Mara and her children by his side. The dawn light crept slowly over the jagged cliffs of Iridian 9, casting a soft glow across the desert. Caleb Thorne stood outside his cabin, the crisp air brushing his face. For the first time in weeks, the canyon seemed calm. The patrols from the mining corporation were gone, at least for now, and the storms had passed. He took a deep breath, feeling the desert stretch wide and empty before him, yet somehow safer now. Inside the cabin, Myra and the children were stirring. Leela yawned and stretched, Finn bounced quietly on the floor, and little Sierra clung to Myra, rubbing her eyes. Caleb walked in quietly, careful not to startle them. "Morning," he said softly. "Today we begin building a better home here, not just to survive, but to live." Mara smiled faintly. "I think we are ready," she said. She had grown confident under Caleb's guidance. Her hands were steady, her eyes clear. She had learned to repair tools, read the desert, and trust in Caleb's instincts. More importantly, she had begun to trust herself. The children were eager. Leela wanted to help build walls strong enough to withstand storms, Finn wanted to work with the robotic horses and the sensors, and Sira wanted to carry small tools like her brother. Caleb watched them, quietly impressed. They were no longer fragile or timid. They were learning courage and independence, ready to face the frontier alongside him. They started by reinforcing the cabin. Caleb showed them how to tie metal beams for support, how to secure the doors and windows, and how to set simple sensors that would alert them to intruders. Mara handled the tools skillfully, working side by side with Caleb. Leela and Finn followed instructions carefully, moving rocks and hammering boards. Sira did her best, handing tools and small parts wherever she could. Hours passed. Sweat ran down their faces, dust covered their clothes, but the work brought a strange joy. They were building more than a cabin. They were building trust, teamwork, and a life together. Caleb glanced at them and felt a quiet pride. For the first time, he understood the meaning of family. By midday, they paused to eat. Caleb served simple food, dried meat, bread, and water. The children laughed as they passed small bowls and shared the little food they had. Mara's eyes softened as she watched Caleb interact with the children. He had grown patient, kind, and protective in ways she had never expected. After the meal, Caleb led them outside again. He wanted to teach them more about the desert, how to read its signs, how to spot safe water, and how to avoid hidden dangers. Leela carefully studied the tracks of desert animals, pointing them out to Caleb. Finn was fascinated by the small mechanical devices Caleb had hidden around the area to monitor movement. Sira followed cautiously, learning to observe without fear. As the day wore on, a distant hum reached Caleb's ears. His instincts flared. Patrols. He signaled to the family to stay calm. But as the sound drew closer, he realized it was not the mining corporation this time. It was a small supply ship from a nearby settlement arriving to trade and bring news. Relief washed over him. They were not entirely alone in the vast desert. The pilot of the ship, a young man named Joran, greeted them warmly. "I heard reports of a family living here," he said. "Thought you might need supplies and maybe a few tools." Caleb nodded politely. Mara's eyes brightened at the sight of fresh food and clean water. Leela and Finn excitedly examined new gadgets Joran had brought, while Sira clung to Mara, shy but curious. Joran stayed briefly, learning about the family's survival in the canyon. Caleb explained quietly about the patrols, the storms, and the precautions they had taken. The pilot was impressed. "You've done well," he said. "It's not easy to survive here, especially with children." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, but he allowed a small nod. After the pilot left, the family returned to their cabin. Caleb sat near the fire, tired but satisfied. Mara joined him, placing a hand on his arm. "You've done so much for us," she said. "Not just protection, but teaching, guiding, caring." Caleb looked at her, his expression softening. "We've done it together," he said. "All of us, you and the children, you've made this cabin a home, not just walls and roof, but life." Night fell. The twin moons rose over the canyon, silver light spilling across the desert. Caleb watched Mara and the children sleep quietly inside the cabin. He thought about the days they had spent learning, surviving, and growing together. The desert had tested them, yet it had also brought them closer. In the quiet, Caleb reflected on his own life. He had been a lonely woodsman for so many years, believing that solitude was safer, simpler. But solitude was empty. It was survival without connection. Mara and the children had changed that. They had brought warmth, laughter, and hope into his life. The next day, Caleb decided to expand their homestead. He showed Mara how to set up small hydroponic gardens using water from the canyon and simple soil mixtures. They planted hardy vegetables and herbs that could survive the harsh conditions. Leela and Finn eagerly helped, while Sira carefully watered the plants, delighted by the small green sprouts. Caleb also built a small observation tower, teaching the children how to watch the desert safely. From here, they could see approaching storms, distant patrols, or wandering creatures. The tower became a symbol of their resilience and teamwork. Each day, the children grew more confident, learning not just survival but responsibility and courage. One evening, as the family gathered around the fire, Caleb told stories of his years in the desert, not to boast, but to teach. Mara listened, her eyes reflecting the firelight. The children were captivated, asking questions, imagining themselves in the adventures. Caleb realized that these moments, simple and quiet, were the ones that would stay with them forever. Weeks passed. The frontier remained dangerous, but the family had adapted. Caleb no longer feared solitude because he was not alone. Mara had become his partner, his equal in skill and courage. The children were growing stronger, smarter, braver. The canyon, once empty and lonely, had become a home filled with life, laughter, and learning. One day, as the twin suns set over the horizon, Caleb took a moment to watch the family. Leela and Finn were playing with small devices, testing sensors Caleb had taught them to build. Sierra chased a small robotic horse around the yard, laughing. Mara carried a basket of vegetables from the garden, smiling softly. Caleb felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that life on the frontier, with its storms, patrols, and dangers, was not easy, but it was full. Full of meaning, love, and connection. For the first time in his life, Caleb understood that family was more than blood. It was trust, courage, care, and the choice to stay together through every trial. As night fell, the family gathered outside once more. The stars stretched across the sky, and the twin moons reflected on the desert sand. Caleb stood behind them, protective yet peaceful. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder, the children leaning close. Together, they watched the desert, wide and wild, but no longer frightening. Caleb spoke softly, almost to himself. "We will face storms, patrols, and dangers, but together we are strong. We are a family, and nothing can take that away." Mara smiled, squeezing his hand. Leela and Finn nodded in agreement, while little Sierra rested her head against her mother's arm, content and safe. Caleb looked at them and finally allowed himself a small, genuine smile. He had lived for years in the silence of the desert, thinking he wanted nothing but solitude. Now he understood that true life came from love, connection, and the bonds we choose to protect. The cabin glowed warmly in the night, a beacon of safety in the wild canyon. Caleb, Mara, and the children had survived the frontier. They had faced danger, learned courage, and built trust. And most importantly, they had discovered family. Caleb knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, storms would come, patrols might return, and the desert would continue to test them. But for the first time, he did not feel fear. He felt hope. He felt belonging. And as he looked at Mara and the children sleeping peacefully inside the cabin, he knew that no matter what came, they would face it together. For Caleb Thorne, the lonely woodsman of Iridian 9, life had changed forever. The frontier was no longer a place of isolation and danger. It was a home, a place of laughter, learning, and love. And with Mara and her children by his side, he understood something he had never thought possible. He was no longer alone, and he would never be alone again. The twin moons shone over the canyon, silver light reflecting on the cabin, the garden, and the small robotic horses. Caleb watched silently, heart full, knowing that the family he had chosen, and who had chosen him in return, was now his life, his purpose, and his forever.